Good evening and good morning wherever you are around the world. As part of the Eye of 20 for G20, my name is Yashika Singh, and I'm here to welcome you to our series Faith in Action that examines some of the G20 goals to foster international cooperation and coordination on economic and financial policies to promote a stable and prosperous global economy. We are here today in studio where three amazing women are going to share some important insights into some of the challenges facing the world community today. One of the issues that we are raising tonight is a very sad and serious issue that looks at the SDG goals target 8.7, where immediate and effective measures need to be taken to eradicate forced labor and modern slavery. So we know that human trafficking is the recruitment, transportation, and transfer or receipt of people through force, fraud, or deception with the aim of exploiting them for profit. Men, women, and children of all ages and backgrounds can become victims of this crime, which occurs in every region of the world. And tonight we examine and get to the heart of the issue with three amazing ladies. So my co-host tonight is Sandile, and he's going to introduce the two of them who are going to share with us some opening statements on these challenges.
Thank you, Yashika. And I want to also thank our panelists today, as well as those that are joining online. We are grateful to you. We're also grateful for the questions you asked. So if you do have questions throughout the session, feel free to just chat or put them on the chat. Our first panelist who's going to share some remarks is Ursula Mdaka. Ursula, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much for inviting us to be a part of this forum. We're excited. Okay, as it's been mentioned, my name is Ursula, and I'm here representing the A21 organization. So not everyone knows who A21 is and what we do. So A21 is a global NGO where we assist victims of human trafficking. So we specialize in working on cases of human trafficking. So as I mentioned that we are a global organization, we have a number of locations worldwide where we have our NGO running. And in specific locations, we do have what we call a human trafficking hotline operating. And I am currently at the A21 South Africa office, and we have a national human trafficking hotline at our location. So I'm going to speak a little bit more about that so that you understand what that is, who I am, and where we're from. So as I mentioned, we have what we call a national human trafficking hotline. It is a toll-free hotline that runs 24/7 and it runs 365 days per year. So victims are able to call us directly any time of the day with whatever situations that they're in, and they can get assistance from us to get extracted from their situations. Not only that, but community members also are able to call in and report anything that they've witnessed, anything that they've seen, or anything that they've suspected, and they can give us the information, and then we can also assist from there. So we work with a number of stakeholders and partners and civil society members in order to combat this battle against human trafficking. So the Human Trafficking Hotline is one of the entities that we have within our recovery department that helps with that. We also have a chatbot running as well. So they don't only have to just call. They can also use our chatbot if they're not comfortable to speak to us directly, because some people are not comfortable. Other victims are not able to speak directly for safety reasons. So we have a chatbot running. They can also email us, and they can also access us through our website by filling in a web form and report to us whatever situation that they want to report. So that's just a little bit of a summary of who we are and what we do. So I'm just going to go into the agenda for today. So I will be speaking on what is human trafficking, what does human trafficking look like. I'll speak of victim identification and needs, as well as what is my role, what is our role. So this is going to be the call of action moment where we just speak about that and give you an idea from our side as to what we feel you can do in order to assist with this fight against human trafficking. So what is human trafficking? Human trafficking is the exploitation of a person for their labor, services, or commercial services. It affects millions of men, women, and children all around the world. So people usually assume that human trafficking is something that only affects women. They don't really think that it also affects men, and it also does affect children as well. And it is known as a crime that is hidden in plain sight because it's often neglected or ignored, or it's seen as something else besides human trafficking. Some people may see certain situations like GBV, which is gender-based violence, or they might see a sex worker on the street and assume that they chose to be on the street to do what they're doing, but they actually don't know their story. And some of them have been trafficked and forced into being sex workers. They might see a child begging on the street and assume that that's all that it is. But there are instances where children get trafficked and then they are forced to be stationed on the street and to beg for money or beg for food for the trafficker's benefit. They might see domestic workers and assume that everything is normal within their working conditions. But then once you hear about the conditions that they're in and the fact that they're not even getting paid and other details within the case, then you realize that they also are victims of trafficking. Or they might see a worker, a seasonal laborer. This is more so in the agricultural space, where, because it's a huge landscape on a farm, where they see like a large amount of workers seasonally and they think, oh, that's normal. In certain instances, there's a lot of foreign nationals that actually get trafficked to work on those on those agricultural spaces. And people think, oh, it's normal, but it's actually victims of trafficking that you're witnessing, sorry. And now I'm just going to be speaking about the cycle of victimization. So human trafficking is known as, within human trafficking, there's a cycle of victimization. So I'm going to explain what that means. So vulnerability is always something that human trafficking or human traffickers use. They take advantage of people's vulnerability in order to put them in the situation of exploitation. So there's a number of different people that can be in a vulnerable state, but whatever that is, they know how to use that vulnerability in order to lure people into exploitation. And then there's what we call re-victimization as well. There's people that are able to get out of the exploitation situation, not necessarily being assisted by anyone, but maybe they were able to get out themselves. But now they've been in it for so long, or they've endured so much that now it's difficult for them to really get back into society. Now they are vulnerable once again. And just because they are out of one vulnerable situation, because they are not equipped, they're not assisted well, they end up being re-victimized again and end up in a trafficking situation again and end up being exploited again. So that's what we mean by the cycle of victimization. So this is our strategy at A21 and how we combat this cycle of victimization. So we have 3 departments at A21. We have our reach, we have our recover, and we have our restore. So our reach department is where we do our awareness. So our awareness efforts, awareness campaigns, that's where we do our presentations. That's where we get the word out there of what is human trafficking, what does it look like. We have a reach coordinator that does presentations at schools. She does them at events. She does them in workplaces. She does them with our partners in our organizations in training them and presenting what this crime looks like and how they can assist. And then we have our recover department, which is where I am based, where our National Human Trafficking Hotline is as well. So this is where we assist victims directly. As I mentioned before, they can either report to us directly or community members can report to us. And then we assist in getting victims out of those human trafficking situations by collaborating with other stakeholders and other partners in order to avoid the exploitation that takes place or get them out of that exploitation that they are already in. And then our restore department, that is where we have what we call a freedom center. So the freedom center is where we have our social workers and our case workers. So in instances where we've been able to assist victims out of those situations, whatever it may be, then they have an opportunity to be able to be a part of our programs at the freedom center, where our social workers will walk a journey with them of providing counseling, assisting with medical assistance if needed, but they work a journey with them with helping them gain skills again, gain their confidence again, or being able to be back on their feet again so that they can go back into society and not be in the same vulnerable state that they were in when they got caught in the trafficking situation in the first place. So that restore department is the one that really helps in avoiding the cycle of victimization that I spoke about earlier before. And then what people don't realize is that human trafficking is actually a global crisis. Others might think it's a small thing, but we're seeing more and more now that the public is becoming aware of how big of an issue this is. And yes, it is a global crisis. There's 50 million people that are enslaved in the world today, and obviously that number is not completely accurate because there's other cases that haven't been able to be reported or being attended to. So it's probably 50 million plus that are being enslaved in the world today. And this industry or this crime, it's known as one of the fastest generating industries because it earns around 258 trillion rand. And obviously that's in our South African currency. Whatever country you're in, you can obviously translate it to whatever it is. And again, that doesn't mean that this number is accurate. It probably is more than that, but this is just an estimate according to the cases that have been dealt with. So it's an industry that earns a lot of money, and at the same time, it's one that is still a work in progress in terms of it being attended to properly. And then within the African context, there's about 7 people in Africa that are living in modern day slavery till this day. And that is 5.2 out of every 1,000 people. So that is also just a mind-blowing statistic just to show the reality of this crime. Now I'm going to speak on what does human trafficking look like. So in our context in South Africa, I just want to give you an idea. So within South Africa, there's a legislation that has been created in order to combat human trafficking or to deal with human trafficking cases. And this was launched in 2015. And it's the first law that addresses trafficking in person cases where victims will be able to assist it properly within the court, and where perpetrators will also be able to receive proper penalties according to what they've the crime that they've caused. So I want to mention this act. It's called the Paco Tip Act because this legislation, there's certain elements that need to be present within cases in order for cases to then be declared as human trafficking under our law and under our government. So it also, in each country, there will probably be a law that exists that addresses human trafficking or that will qualify cases as human trafficking when there's certain elements that are within that case. So I'm going to speak about those elements so that we are all aware of what needs to be present or what details would be considered in order to then declare a case as human trafficking by law as well. So within the legislation, there's 3 elements that would need to be present in a case in order for it to then be declared as human trafficking. There's what we call the act, there's the means, and there's the purpose. So the act is what is done, which is the recruitment stage of the trafficking, and the means, how is it done, and then why is it done. So I'm going to go in a bit more detail for each element so that we all understand exactly what that is. So speaking about the act, as I mentioned, is the recruitment stage of a trafficking situation. So the recruitment looks different within all the cases that we've worked with. It's never the same. It looks different all the time, everywhere, all around the world. But these are usually the type of signs that we've picked up or forms of recruitment that we've picked up. There's forced job opportunities. There's promises of a better future where you meet someone or you know, or you hear of someone and they promise that they're going to give you access to better education, or they're going to give you access to this form of living, this form of lifestyle. So they promise you a better future, but they're obviously using that to lure you into a situation of trafficking. There's also false relationships and lover boy schemes. So this is where people go out there to pretend to be pursuing an actual relationship with you, but it's only a facade. It's only a mask to lure you in to gain your trust. And then after that, once they have you and have your trust and make you think that they are this person that is there to protect you or is there to just pursue a relationship, it actually turns into something else. Another form is abduction. Others also have been sold by family and friends, which is an unfortunate thing to even think about, but it's real. We have dealt with cases where there's family members that have sold their own family members and got them trafficked because of the money that they gained from it. There's friends that have also done that betraying people that they know as well. And then we also have repay a debt, which is where people are made to believe or think that they owe someone a large amount of money, and now they need to work towards paying off that debt. In the first place, they didn't even owe the person any debt, but they make it seem like you owe them debt, then you feel like you are indebted to them, so you have to do whatever they ask you to do in order for you to make up that amount. But obviously, again, that's just a recruitment tactic as well. And then I'm going to speak about the means. The means of how is it done? It's always done through the abuse of vulnerability, as I mentioned before with the cycle of victimization. Traffickers always take advantage of people who are vulnerable or the concept of vulnerability in order for them to lure people and get them into the exploitation stage. So any abuse that leads a person to believe that he or she has no other option but to submit to exploitation. And there's different forms that are within the means. There's always threat of harm, and there's always use of force. There's always some form of abuse, sexual, physical, substance, and mental abuse in place in order to keep people within the trafficking situation. There is coercion, which is physical, which is controlling the person as to where they are, where they go, what they do. So there's no freedom of movement for these people because they are coerced by these people by the traffickers to act a certain way, be a certain way, or be at a certain place. So everything is controlled. There is also coercion in the emotional sense, where I mentioned the physical, but the emotional sense is them taking control of their mind, the way that they think, how they see things, how they perceive things. There's always false promises that are told. There's controlling, there's shaming. Sometimes they use cultural practices as well to keep people within the exploitation stages. So it looks different all the time. And then there's also fraud and deception that's also present. Like I mentioned, that forced job opportunities or people promising that they're going to give you a better future, always a part of promising something that they're not going to live up to, or just to make you think that they're going to give it to you, but it becomes something else. Or a promise of a relationship, but it's actually not that. It's something else in between. So that the fraud and deception is also something that is present within the means of human trafficking cases. And then the purpose of human trafficking. So the purpose is always for the purpose of any form or manner of exploitation. And I'm going to go into a bit of detail as to what are the types of exploitation. So the types of exploitation in human trafficking that exists is there's forced labor, there's domestic servitude, there's bonded labor, there's child soldiers, organ harvesting, as well as sexual exploitation. So I'm going to explain those in detail so that we all understand. So sexual exploitation is forcing or deceiving someone else or coercing a person to perform commercial sex or to be in part of the prostitution industry. So that's what we call, that's in human trafficking. Sexual exploitation or sex trafficking is when someone is forced to then do the sex work. It's not by choice, they have to do it. There's no pay that comes to them. There's a lot of control. And again, the recruitment looks differently. Maybe they might have been promised a different job, or they thought they were pursuing something with someone romantically, but that someone ends up putting them in a situation where they then work in a brothel, and that becomes their lifestyle. Another form is forced labor, where which is also known as labor trafficking. So this is where they force someone to do work without any consent, without their will. The people find themselves in situations where they are working and there's no pay that comes to them at all. There's been different situations that different cases that we've seen or dealt with where somebody might have applied for a job overseas. Then when they get there, their documentation gets taken by these people immediately. Because in the first place, they were not actual businesses. They were pretending to offer a job opportunity, but they knew what they were going to do once the people arrived. So they take their documentation and they tell them that this is the work that they are supposed to do. They can't go anywhere. And if they try to escape, they threaten them, they threaten their lives, or threaten to hurt them. Some get tortured. But now also you don't have your documentation, so you are vulnerable because you're in a country that you do not know, and you feel like now you have to do this work and there's no other choice. Or they threaten to hurt your family. They say a number of things to make you feel like you have to do whatever they're telling you to do. Otherwise, there's going to be bad consequences from that. There's also bonded labor. So bonded labor involves someone having to work to pay off a debt. like I mentioned prior, it's an impossible amount that they are told that they need to pay back. So let's say you were pursuing this job opportunity and it ends up having been a false job opportunity. When you get there, the boss would say that, oh, but I paid for your flights, I covered all your documents, I covered all this payment. So now you have to do this type of work for me to pay back the amount that we paid in order to cover these travel expenses and all those things. And they don't mention initially that if we cover the transportation for you, then you have to pay that back. They know what they're doing. So they make it seem like everything is covered, everything is going to be paid for. Then when you get there, when you get into that situation, and they say, no, you actually owe us now this amount of money, so you need to do this work. So this is just an example of bonded labor, of where they say someone owes them a large amount of money, but they don't. And they feel like now they have to work for it in order to then end up being free. And usually that freedom never comes unless obviously they get assisted, because the intention was never to actually let them get out of that situation. It was just to keep them in that cycle for a long time. There's also what we call domestic servitude. So domestic servitude is when a domestic worker works within the household and also lives within the household that they are working in. This one is kind of difficult in certain instances to identify, because people always see nannies or au pairs that are living within residences, and they're like, oh, but that's normal. Well, we're not saying it's not normal, but we are saying that there is a form of trafficking called domestic servitude, where domestic workers are where people can get domestic workers to work within their households and they stay in the house, but they actually exploit them while they are working there. They usually get foreign nationals to be the ones to come and work in their houses, and then once they arrive, they take their documentation, they receive no payment, they work ridiculous hours, and some of them even get sexually exploited within those instances in the household, because no one sees them. They live in the house, their family is far away, so they do whatever they want to do with them and cause them to work ridiculous hours, and they're in a vulnerable state and they get exploited in that way. So this is also a form of trafficking that we know of as well, which is domestic servitude. Now I want to speak about victim identification, what to look out for in order to figure out if someone is a victim of trafficking or if a situation might be a victim of trafficking. So victims can be of any age, race, gender, or nationalities, and but there's a number of vulnerabilities that makes others a lot more at risk than other groups. So, for instance, when an individual enters or remains in a country illegally, pregnancy, disability, addiction to substances, social, political, and economic conditions that force people to migrate, previous experiences of physical or sexual violences. These are just examples of certain vulnerabilities that put people in states where they are easily lured by human traffickers. Children also are particularly at risk of being victims of human trafficking. There's a number of vulnerabilities within that sector as well that makes them a lot more vulnerable than other groups. So homelessness, or the child is in a foster care, children from unstable household, foreign-born children, children who identify as LGBTQ plus, children living in poverty, children with behavioral health concerns, abused children, or children struggling with substance abuse as well. It's just also an example of other forms of just circumstances that children are born in, or whatever it may be, where it puts them in a vulnerable state of also being easily targeted when it comes to this crime. Now I'm just going to speak about the indicators of human trafficking. So there's a number of indicators to look out for to kind of gauge whether someone is a victim of human trafficking or not. It's not always easy, but the more you are educated about it, the more you learn about it, it becomes a lot more, I don't want to say easy, but it becomes a lot more common for you to be able to point and see something that is something very suspicious that's not normal, when you actually know what the indicators are and what they can look like. So, for example, they are controlled by another person. They are always accompanied by someone. They never speak for themselves. They never go anywhere by themselves. We have controlled movement. They are not allowed to go to work or go to the shops or leave the house by themselves. There's signs of physical abuse. You always see bruises or scratches or marks, and there's lack of earnings. with instances where I mentioned like domestic servitude or forced labor, it's people that are working, but there's no money that's actually coming to them. It's always going to the trafficker. The same with the sex work situation. You will see them on the streets working and you assume that they're there by choice and you think that they're earning money, but whatever they earn actually goes directly to the trafficker and they get nothing from that. Foreign or unfamiliar with language, people that don't know whatever language that is spoken within the country that they're in. Yes, there are those that visit other countries and they're just there to explore for vacation. And obviously that's a different instance, but we're just saying this is one of the indicators of that. Someone just looking lost, not understanding the languages of the people around them, and they're just out of place. There's people that have a lack of trust, people that are in this form of exploitation. It's not easy for them to want to talk to somebody. It's not easy for them to open up. So seeing someone that is closed in, that doesn't want to interact, that's always looking down, doesn't look at you directly when they speak, or doesn't even speak to people at all, could also be an indicator as well of someone being in a situation like that. Deceived by a forced job offer, as I mentioned, that forced job opportunities is also a form that is used in order to lure people into trafficking. I mentioned overly fearful, depressed, or submissive. Those are also the signs. Bowel health and malnutrition. Some of them, obviously, they're not catered to, they're not given food. The basic needs are not things that they are given when they are locked in houses or forced to do work. So signs of bad health and malnutrition could be signs that someone is actually a victim of trafficking. There's feelings of being trapped. There's also lack of identification. As I mentioned, there's instances where they will definitely take your documentation because that automatically puts you in a vulnerable state, because now you feel like you're liable to them. If you go to another country that you do not know and you don't know what the law is there, once your documentation is taken away, you're obviously scared that the police, when they find out that you don't have your documentation, they automatically think you're just an illegal foreigner in the country. And you think they're not even going to think about your story as to how you got there and what happened. So already people then become vulnerable and they feel like they now need to do whatever this person says because they not own, but they are now holding my identification, my ID, my passports. There's nothing that I can do. Someone that doesn't know their home or work address, like when you speak to them, they don't know where they live, they don't know what area, they don't know their address. It's just, these are also just other signs of just someone looking and seeming out of place that might be indicators that they might be victims of human trafficking. So now I'm just going to be speaking about what is my role, what is our role, what is your role, what can that look like, what can you do to assist in this fight against human trafficking. I'm just going to use a case example just to give a little bit of context of what this can also possibly look like wherever around the world, especially within this specific forum. So we once had a case where it was one of the hotspot areas within our country that is known for human trafficking, or where we've had cases of human trafficking being reported from this area. So there's a church down the road of this area where it just has a number of brothels there that are currently also still being investigated. But there's certain victims that have a window or an opportunity where they're allowed to go to church. As I mentioned, when they go to any other place, they obviously don't go alone. They are watched, they're controlled. But when they go to church, the trafficker doesn't think anything's going to happen when you're going to church. Like, you're just going to church and you're worshiping and praising, and that's it. And you're going to come back. So they don't think of, oh, we're going to make sure that someone goes there with you because something is going to happen. So they allowed the specific victim to be able to go to church. So she would go here and there on Sundays. It's not like she had the freedom to go every Sunday or every time she wanted to, obviously. But whenever she was then given the chance, she would go to church, and slowly she got comfortable. Like, it felt like a safe space for her there. And she started to interact with the people at church, and the leaders were now speaking to her, and they asked her, like, no, who are you? Like, what do you need prayer for? Like, and on all of that. So she mentioned that bit by bit, she just mentioned that there's something that I'm going through, something that I'm facing. And I don't know if I feel safe enough to share it with you, but I really feel like this is a type of safe space that I'll be able to share and get assistance. So she shared her situation, and she happened to be a victim of sex trafficking, where she was lured into a situation where she thought she was pursuing a job opportunity, but it was a forced job opportunity, and it ended up being forced to work on the streets. So she explained that to them, and then the church leader, they then did some research online on the signs and the story that she said. She was like, okay, this sounds like human trafficking. So she did a bit more research, and then she found out about our organization. Then she contacted us and contacted our hotline, and we were able to speak to her, get the details, and then we we're like, no, the next time she comes in, just call us, and then we'll be able to screen her, because that's what we do at the hotline. We speak to the victims and we screen them to figure out whether it's a human trafficking case or not. So we did the screening and we identified her as a positive ID. Then we came up with a safety plan on extracting her and getting her out of the situation. So we worked with our partners, our stakeholders, the local law enforcement, and we were able to get her out of that situation, get her medical care. She was able to be then a part of our Freedom Center in our Restore department, and we helped her with counseling. We helped her to get back on her feet again. But it all started with her feeling like she was in an area or in place that felt safe enough for her to then be honest about what her situation is. So this is just an example of when you are aware, when you are educated, when you see something is off and you don't just ignore it, but address it and ask, figure out, oh, if someone looks malnutritioned, or if they look like they have scars on their bodies, like there's the signs of physical abuse, or they are very to themselves, very isolated, question those signs, like question those indicators. Don't just ignore them. Just ask and say, like, what's your situation? What do you need help with? Like, are you okay? What is this mark that I'm seeing? Do you need help and anything? It all starts by showing concern. When you show concern and you show care and you ask, there's nothing wrong with that. No one's going to question that. So automatically they see something or feeling something that they never feel when they obviously are in the hands or the force of the trafficker. Those interactions is what helps them feel like, okay, I can be honest with this person. Then they're able to be honest about what their situation is. And then when you are informed as to who can I report the situation to in my local space within your context, what organizations do I know, or who are the law enforcement numbers that I can contact that can assist, then you're able to collaborate and actually assist someone and actually help someone's life, get them out of a situation that could have ended them. So this is just a case example that I wanted to mention, which is something that we always highlight because it's one of those cases where we're just like, it was just amazing, the collaboration with the church, because now they use our resources at their church to inform their congregation about what is human trafficking, what it looks like, what resources are available, so that in their own communities, as people in the congregation, if they've seen people like this in their own areas, they also know what it is, or they know who to call and ask, just to say, hey, do you need help? Or hey, what's happening? It all starts from caring. And then I also just wanted to speak about, in general, the call to action. What does that look like and what can that be? It always starts by educating yourself. Get equipped. Know what is human trafficking, know what it looks like, know what the indicators are, know what the law says within your countries, within your context about it. The more you know about it, the more you are able to help and assist, because you know what it looks like, what it sounds like, what it could be. And then when you know, you also mobilize your community, educate the ones around you about it. Now that you've known, let others know about it as well, not only in your household, but in your communities, in your workspaces, wherever you are. Just let people know more about what you've now been equipped about. What is what is human trafficking, sorry, and what it could look like in their own spaces. There's a number of resources that are available online, especially on our website. We have a number of free programs, free resources available for people to get equipped in understanding what is this crime, what can it look like, and how you can help. Those resources, they help you, but they also help you to be able to spread the word to others so that they know more about what is this. We can all raise awareness about this. It's not just about us. It doesn't need a professional. As an individual, you getting educated about it, you can assist fighting this crime, because then you can help others know more about it as well. And another form as well is to fund. If you are able to, as I mentioned, we have a number of locations globally. You can offer your services in volunteering. You can want to volunteer in one of our offices. It's something that we are open to. We're welcome to as many hands as we can have. We're open to that because we need it. So if you are able to volunteer, it's something that we are open to. If you are able to raise funds and donate, it's something that would be helpful for us as well to continue to run and do what we do, because we're an NGO that runs solely on donation and funds. So people that are out there that are able to provide donations, that's also a form of way that you can help as well. So these are just the 3 forms that I would say is the call to action. Educate yourself by getting equipped, and mobilize your community by equipping them so that they know what is it. Educate the environment and the community that you're in so they know about it, but also be a part of the cause, whether it's volunteering, whether it's using our resources and sharing it with others, or whether it's donating when you can. That is something that will really help us in this journey of fighting against human trafficking. And before I finish, as I mentioned, sorry, the prevention materials, like I said, we have safety guides, free downloadable programs, facilitator guides. This is all available on our website, and it's free for downloads. We even have videos as well, video examples of what human trafficking looks like. If maybe you are a visual person, we have that available there for you to look at and have access to. But I just wanted to show an example just before I finish. This is just also one of the call to actions that we're just asking a number of our stakeholders, partners, community members out there. We have what we call a Global Freedom Summit that we are launching this year. It's going to be taking place in October. And this is going to be a hybrid experience that is designed to raise awareness and spark action. And this year, we are highlighting the growing crisis of online child exploitation. This has been something that is ongoing and that has been growing in this day and age, and we really want to highlight that form of trafficking. So we're really asking a number of stakeholders, a number of partners, a number of community members to come behind, to join us in being part of this initiative where we're raising awareness about this form of trafficking. What is great about the summit is that before we used to do what is called the Walk for Freedom, which was a global yearly event where physically we had people that came together at different locations globally, and we did a walk in order to raise awareness of human trafficking. This time it's on an online platform, so it can be available to anybody anywhere, whether you are watching it with your family, watching it with your friends, watching it at work, or with the community that you have. But it's going to be a piece of work that really highlights what does online child sexual exploitation looks like, and what you can do in avoiding that within the communities or the people that are in your world. You can either host a screening, or you can just register to watch it yourself. But on our website, again, this information is also available if you're wanting to be a part of that. I just wanted to share a video, a clip of how online child exploitation, what it looks
Excuse me,
like.
Ursula.
Oh, sorry.
I'm so sorry. Thank you so much for your presentation. We won't be able to show the video, but we will share with our viewers, if that's okay. Please share with us. We're a bit over time, but thank you so much for your insightful, remarks. You've just shown us we have a big problem on our hands, and we definitely need to work together to resolve it. Thank you so much, Ursula.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Please stop sharing. Thank you so much. I apologize for cutting you off. I feel so bad. What you're sharing is so good and so helpful. And when I was preparing for this call, one of the things I was in my mind, I was thinking, am I equipped? And I realized I'm not. So I was looking forward to all the insights. So we have the next speaker is Raksha. And Raksha, please, over to you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for this opportunity. And where I'd like to start is to understand where this concept of humans feeling that they had the entitlement or right to own other humans. So this comes from a history of people feeling that power came from ownership and it came from financial gain. And to ensure that financial gain happened, and
with that came power. People needed to control states and countries, and a state and countries is trees and grounds without its people. So they felt the need to control lands and then people, which gave them more power. And then states, as we know in history, believed that the more land they had, the greater their power. And the greater their power, it gave them a form of superiority. And that's where it stemmed from. So, and we all know then how that evolved to people feeling they own a country. Then they owned the people, and then they took slaves to different parts of the world that were colonized to become workers for them and to give effect to their need for power and ownership and material gain. So I want to just zoom into two examples that for me are relevant. I have an interest in understanding indentured labor and specifically the Indian diaspora who have landed in South Africa and a few other countries. I was having breakfast with a friend a few weeks ago, and he related a story. And I like stories because then they become relatable and it doesn't feel so abstract. And that is relevant for the topic of human trafficking. Because we don't hear these stories, we think it doesn't exist. And those statistics that we see that run into millions feel like it's a fantasy. So we need to ensure, even if by protecting the identity of people, that we bring those stories home, that we say it loud and clearly that human traffic is happening all over in our communities. My daughter is 22 years old next year. When she was about 5, I won't mention the name of the mall that we went to, and I'd lost something. So I went into the security room of that mall, and this was many years ago. She was a little girl. And I said, I saw a wall full of pictures of little kids. And I said, what is this? And they said, these are the children that have been kidnapped from this mall in over the last 6 months. And then I realized, oh my God, which world am I living in? Why hasn't this been reported? Where are these statistics? So I don't understand how and why the media or community are not making the stats accessible, because in having access to information, we can do more to ensure that it doesn't happen. We'll take care of our children, and there'll be more awareness. So back to my story of indentures. Sorry, please bear with me. So my friend tells me the story that many, many years ago, his 18-year-old great-grandfather was walking on the streets of Bihar, which is a state in India, a very fine, strong young man. And the man then was walking towards the train station, and before you know it, he was abducted. His head was covered and he was taken away. Then he heard what happened and he was handed over to a group of people in a ship, right? And there was an exchange of money. The agent got money and he was taken to the ship. And that was what the narrative we see in our history books is that the Indians from India came to South Africa, Trinidad, Tobago, and Mauritius because they were promised a land of milk and honey and gold, and they came of free will. But that's not true. Many of them were kidnapped. There were also prisoners who fought the British that were taken from custody and put into these ships. The family then assumed that this person had died or something happened, and they did his funeral and his last rites. Years or months later, they received letters from this person saying, I'm in South Africa, I was abducted and I was taken as an indentured laborer to work in the sugarcane fields. And that's the history of many people in this world that landed up in different parts of the world, Europe, South America, parts of Africa. Lots of slaves were taken from Africa, and they were taken to build the rest of the world. And a recent statistic, it's probably been known, but it was very interesting for me, is that the British took a lot of the people that they kidnapped or as slaves to fight in the wars, and they put them in the front so that they would be most vulnerable and killed. So that history is important. It stems from power, money, and if we bring back the whole story of why human trafficking happens today, and the biggest reason is once again to get financial gain. There are some instances where it is psychopaths that abuse people because of some pathology that they have, but the biggest reason is organized crime. So it was a world that created the notion of humans that you could own a human, you could use them as your machine or your slave, and you could sell them in exchange for money. I mean, that's what my story showed, and it happened with millions of people throughout the world, right? So in that, it is so interesting that we in 2025, and the world has come together through different institutions like the United Nations and so forth that have said, we will not tolerate any violation of human rights. So the same world that okayed slavery now, the positive of it is we've all stand together to say this is an injustice. Nobody can cause harm to another human being or humans or animals or vulnerable people. So that so we have evolved as humans. As we okayed the slavery, we now condemn it together. So whatever is happening is unlawful. So what's interesting, and I want to use two examples, is that the Financial Action Task Force is a United Nations subcommittee that's responsible for ensuring that there is no money used for financing terrorism or used for money. The money cannot be used for illegal means. So what they've done is to ensure that you're part of the global financial community, and to be exist in the world, you have to be part of a global financial community because our banks are interlinked and so forth. You have to have laws that will ensure that you do not support any transactions where it is used for the purposes of illicit crimes, human trafficking, terrorist financing. Every country, most countries have that. And South Africa, as you know, by the FATF, we've been fined previously, and now we're improving because they do an assessment, like a test, to see if the banks have some measure to see and monitor these transactions. What does the government do? Then we have FIC, the FIC Financial Intelligence Center, where all these transactions are reported to, and then they must get prosecuted if they're identified as being used for these illicit means. So that's one part. The other part, and it brings us to this, is there's a trafficking protocol which was developed internationally, I think in 2003, which then resulted in each country having laws specifically to ensure that because it's an international crime, there has to be some sort of unified thinking in how this gets tackled. And it cannot be, each country can't do their own thing, because we need the unified resources, the unified thinking, the unified findings to come and help us to combat this. Hence, each country, and the legislation that the previous speaker spoke about, Ursula spoke about, comes from that. So if you want to be part of an international community, you have to have these legislations in place. So I started by saying that we lived in a world that okayed slavery and okayed human abuse. And now we stand up together to say, no, it's not all, we can't celebrate fully because the figures are still there, this still happens. But it's a big, big victory that we all together can openly say, we do not support this. This is a crime. And that was not there. So well done to the human race on one thing that we got right. So that's the first part. And that context for me is very important. The second part that I've asked, although I'm a legal practitioner that I enjoy dealing with social justice issues and looking at legislation and regulation and policy and to see how that's evolved to ensure that society is protected from injustices. For me, I have also a very strong interest in looking at how communities and religion can come together to use its teachings or its foundings to make a significant impact, because these are social problems. They live in society. The person that's a trafficker is somebody's son or somebody's neighbor. So we need an infiltration and an awareness, and that can only happen in a community at the level of community and religious institutions, and to appeal to people's sense of values, which comes from religion. And that is necessary to deal with a lot of the injustices. So unfortunately, I'm going to reveal a personal thing that happened to me. In 3 years ago, my family and I were hijacked and kidnapped. And I kept on speaking to the perpetrators and telling them that your mum won't be proud of what you're doing. Look at me as your mum and look at my children as your children. And I appealed to their sense of humanity so that they would identify the human in me and as I do in them, and that would probably prevent them from harming us. And it worked. Once they brought back my wallet, took everything away with my ID and says, Ma, there's your wallet. So it's about connecting at a human level. So I know it's a bit of a personal story, but it's the reality. So let's go back to church and let's go back to temple and let's go back to mosque. Our religion and the fundamental aspect of religion is caring for the people around us, respecting the unit of family. The disabled boy down the road, hold his hand to go to the bus. The old lady that needs her medicines to be picked up, help her pick up the medicines. The unemployed uncle up the road, take a meal to him. And that's what community is. That's what religion is. Then, if that's the thread of goodness in our society, how can we okay the abduction of people, the keeping of a helper in a home, taking away their legal documents and making them work in unacceptable conditions without pay? If my neighbor or your neighbor is doing that and I visit that, I have a duty of care to stand up against that. If I hear down the road there was somebody's son involved and getting paid for hijacking and kidnapping, I have a duty of care to do something. And that's what society is. There was an example that I heard in a conference recently, and I think this is the nub and the crux of everything. The hands work to plant, the hands work to cook, the hands work to feed the body, right? But it is that hand, when the body is nourished, that comes back. It also helps these hands to be strong. Similarly, that whole notion that we are an integral part of society, we cannot leave it to the Minister of Justice, the Minister of Police, or the police to stop that. we must be instruments and empower ourselves through individually and through religious and community means to ensure that we speak openly about this. We deal with criminals and say it's unacceptable. People that have been trafficked that come back into society, not to condemn them in a way where they feel embarrassed and they don't belong. We have a duty of care of ensuring that they are healed and they are facilitated back to be part of society. So that's the first thing. The Hindu notion is that human beings are an embodiment of divinity. And if that's true, then we have a bigger duty of care to ensure that all the divinity around us are protected. And we believe the hands that serve are holier than the lips that pray, right? So part of that service is to have discernment and to know evils like human trafficking exists and to do what's necessary to ensure that it doesn't happen without thinking, no, it's not happening in my area, that doesn't happen. To talk more about it in schools, to talk about prostitution in schools, and what does that mean? To talk about the helpers that are being abused and almost kept as slaves, which is taboo previously. To talk about people that have been converted and used as instruments to spread other religions, which we're seeing happen a lot in this world. To talk about it and have discussions, is that right or wrong? Because it comes back to human rights. And what is human rights? The basis of everything is going back to identity, and identity. Human rights looks at identity, my right to be a human being, my right to dignity, my right not to be harmed, my right not to be forced into any form of economic activity. All of that goes back to respecting me as a human first. And the courts are beautiful, the organizations are beautiful, but it starts at community and religion level. So on that note, I would quickly, the previous speaker spoke about the legal aspects, and thank you for covering that. So I won't go into detail as I prepared to go into this because you've heard it. But briefly, I want to just speak about a few things that are relevant. Human trafficking violates the right to life, the right to liberty and security, the right not to be subjected to slavery, servitude, forced labor, and bonded labor, not to be subjected to torture or cruel, inhumane, degrading treatment or punishment, to be free from gendered violence, freedom of association, freedom of movement, the highest attainable standard of physical and mental health. We have a right to that. Our children have a right to that. Just and favorable conditions of work. And a lot of work has been done looking at child labor and the conditions of people working in the farms in South Africa. It happens all over the world, but specifically in South Africa. And that cycle of abuse where some people are paid liquor for the work done, and that perpetuates a culture of alcoholism, fetal alcohol syndrome, where mothers give birth to babies who are addicted to alcohol at birth, abuse, and a whole lot of social evils come out from that. But it comes from people being kept in farms as slaves almost. And we're scared to say the word slaves, but it is slavery. We are entitled to an adequate standard of living, social security, and special protection applicable to children, amongst others. We must know that we have legislation to protect us, but we should be the greatest ambassadors, as I spoke to ensure that we speak against these social evils. We speak about these things that are normally taboo in all social circles, including our schools. We tell the children, if somebody calls you and you don't know them, do not go. We tell, the fact that technology has advanced, which allows us to speak in this forum, to save this platform of us conversing and for generations to come to be able to see that. That's brilliant. But technology has also created an evil where a lot more people can have access to vulnerable children or communities and lure them under the pretense of some sort of favorable thing, but actually they are involved in human trafficking. The issue of, and the previous speaker spoke about using child pornography, and there was a case that was published in a newspaper recently in Paarl, where the father had taken out pornographic videos and pictures of his minor children, and that was sold in the United States, and he made a lot of money, and the FBI came and provided the evidence to South Africa, and eventually the person was found guilty of a series of acts, and the children were taken away from his custody, and the mother said she didn't know, and so forth. So my point then is the reach that social media has had, the reach and that has also been an enabler to these crimes, because what these traffickers do is that they have a network. They have access to where vulnerable children are, vulnerable women are, and it's all orchestrated through social media, having access to other criminals, other methods, money laundering, and it's a world syndicate. I mean, the people that kidnap and traffic vulnerable people, they don't put them into the sea. They have a network in other countries that assist them, and as I've said, they make money from it. So we have to look at how the role of media and the role of social media and the adverse impact it has played in this area of human trafficking, and what controls we need to have, because people may say it's freedom, but there has to be controls, because anything that has an effect of harming society needs some controls. And some people may advocate and say, no, it's a violation of their freedom of movement and freedom of association, but there has to be controls, especially if there's vulnerabilities in place. There's vulnerabilities that exist in society. The speaker spoke about the domestic legislation. Sorry.
No, we're just looking at, it's so insightful and absolutely well captured in terms of the illustrations that you've just shared. But we do need to move on because we have Winnie here. And I think you've captured a range of things from a historical perspective to where it is today, and that this thread of slavery still, is within us, and it's within the human condition. And it's something that religion has a even more bigger role to play to actually engage that. So up next is Winnie Mutevu, and she's an award-winning human rights defender and a development manager with over 14 years of experience in the counter-trafficking sector. She currently leads advocacy and partnership development at Awareness Against Human Trafficking, which is HEART, supporting Kenya's review of international and national anti-trafficking frameworks. So you've done a lot of work and you've been able to look at issues around counter-trafficking. I hand over to you now to share insights into this rather important, sensitive, and global crisis that we are actually facing.
Thank you very much, Yashika. And I'll just build up on what has been shared so far as we bring this to a close. I think that's what I would like to begin with is just where our last speaker just spoke about human trafficking being a human rights violation, and also being able to understand that this is also a crime. So when you're talking about human trafficking, you're more or less focusing on a crime that has been committed against a human being. And this then gets to inform how we get to respond to the issue. When it comes to what the UN has been able to recommend, looking into UNODC, who are the custodian of the Palermo Protocol, Really, for us to be able to proactively address the crime, we have to do it around the 4 Ps, where we do have prevention, protection, prosecution, as well as partnerships. And so looking into what the role of the faith community in this fight, one of the key things to identify that then faith leaders really are trusted voices in the communities. When it comes to human trafficking, trust is highly betrayed by traffickers. And so looking into where then faith leaders come in, already being a trusted voice, then they really have an open door to look into how they're able to engage with the communities and also how they're able to support the survivors of this crime. So often they're the first to hear of family distress, also looking into migration plans. So people are looking into moving different destinations, are also being able to be the ones who also come firsthand, looking into signs of abuse within our communities, around our families. They also really also have a very close proximity to the grassroots positions when it comes to them being able to engage with the communities across the globe. They are really at the core of what is happening in all the communities. So this really positions them uniquely when it comes to being able to prevent the crime from happening, being able to identify victims of the crime, and also being able to proactively respond when people have been trafficked. And so really looking into how we're able to integrate trafficking messaging, one, in our sermons, in our outreach programs in the communities, pastoral counseling, and then the goal really being able to look into how we shift mindsets, being able to raise awareness and reduce stigma around survivors. Looking into how do we have communities being more prepared to be able to support those who are coming back home after being exploited. And I would say beyond just awareness creation, when it comes to prevention, critical for us to do is also being able to empower those who we know they are most vulnerable to this crime. Many of them are looking for job opportunities, education opportunities, or just a better life. How do we empower them, being able to look into educating them, being able to have them have access to social amenities so that really they have more options, so that when people promise them or lure them with different opportunities, they have more options and they're able to make informed decisions. So being able to proactively address the push factors, the drivers, when it comes to human trafficking. The other area under prevention really is looking into how we can enhance our capacities. For us to respond to this crime, really we can't respond with just basic knowledge. We have to be able to understand in depth, how does it manifest? How does it affect the victims of the crime, the families, as well as where is the role of law enforcement, prosecution? How do we then collaborate with all these agencies to be able to actually ensure that then we are able to comprehensively address the crime? And I'll be able to also look into safe migration. One of the key things we always do emphasize on is, as people continue exploring different opportunities, try and look into how you can safely migrate to be able to reduce your chances of ending up in trafficking situations. One of the key things we actually do from our communities, when you get a chance to run away from your trafficker, run to the nearest religious institution, be it a mosque, be it a church, be it a temple. And the thing is, because we know already the faith community is already trusted, and we believe they're able to actually support this individual. Is looking into also how do we equip ourselves to be able to know when someone walks into our doors, how best do we embrace them and how do we support them when they really reach out to us at the time of need. So that's some of the examples when it comes to prevention. We've seen this happening also in our country. We do have faith-based organizations who are doing nationwide awareness creation. We do have networks of faith communities who are actually purely just focusing on fighting human trafficking and are focusing on being able to actually create awareness to all groups, children, the young people, as well as the adults. The other component is being able to look into how we can step in when it comes to the protection component. The faith-based institutions can be able to actually provide safe spaces. And it's looking into being able to have shelters being run by faith institutions. And also when we can't be able to have that, then having our churches, our mosques and our temples really being able to serve as hubs for victim support, referral pathways for victims, as well as emergency shelter support when it's highly needed. We're able to also partner with organizations who are able to more or less host community dialogues, support reintegration, and also being able to offer spiritual counseling that affirms dignity and healing. And so really looking into wherever we are, because we are across the globe, when a victim is in need of help, making sure that there always a safe space for these individuals, and looking into how we are able to offer different services as needed. And where not possible, then being able to partner with other stakeholders who are able to offer these services to the people in need. When it comes to prosecution, we also do have a limitation on this end. And the thing is, when victims walk into our doors, because it is a crime, it means whatever they are carrying, whatever they are saying, this is open source intelligence, can be used to actually prosecute traffickers. So looking into how do we collect all this information and how do we collaborate with law enforcement to ensure that if it's an adult and they're willing to pursue the criminal justice system, then really they're able to have access to justice. And if it's for children, really looking into how do we protect them and cover them and really support them also throughout this whole journey. And so it's really being able to see also how do we prepare them. No one is happy to walk into a court of law to testify or even just to be a witness. So looking into how do we prepare them pre-trial, during, and post-trial. This is where we also really have to engage other experts in the field, by able to bring in legal counsel to be able to support them to know how do I show up, what do I say, and in case I need support, how do I communicate the same for victims of this crime. And so I'll be able to mention the last bit, which is looking into partnerships, where we are looking to how do we amplify the voices of the communities of the victims as we advocate to looking into change of policies, the frameworks, the systems that get to continue operating where there are so many loopholes that traffickers continue exploiting. How do we advocate for change? So looking into faith leaders, as much as we have moral influence over policy, also really being able to take a proactive role and being able to also have survivor-centered communications that get to also inform what is happening around our policies, and being able to push our governments, our law enforcement to prioritize anti-trafficking efforts and adopt more humane responses as we continue addressing this crime. So when we engage intentionally, the faith community really becomes not just a moral voice, but a frontline actor in ending trafficking. It has been done, it continues to be done, and really looking forward to being able to have more faith communities being able to come together and being able to see how best we're able to continue working to fight this crime. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I think that was deeply insightful, and I must congratulate you on the work that you've been doing as as somebody involved in the space of advocacy. I think each and every one of you have brought so much of light into the subject, but also to actually challenge religious communities. Wouldn't you say, Sandile, that religious communities may not be doing enough to actually address the issues? They have the principles within their faith of honoring humanity at every level, but that we have led society to this level of millions of people that are being trafficked. What is wrong? Why have we not engaged that? Are we too busy praying in temples and churches and worrying about such matters, which is important, but not dealing with the core issue of how we treat each other? Perhaps maybe, Sandila, at this point, we could have some closing statements from each one, because I think we've only dealt with the issue just on trafficking. We've not even dealt anything to do with the refugees. And perhaps it
Yes.
might warrant a different space to deal with refugees. Your take?
Yeah, I agree. I think, what they've done, they've laid it bare that we have a scourge in our society. For me, it's heartbreaking to hear all of these things. It's evil. It's totally unacceptable. And if you look at any religious text from any faith tradition, you will learn that all of our faith traditions inspire us to love our neighbors. They inspire us to care and to be good and not to do anything that is evil. So I think, as we conclude, as Yashika has mentioned, much of what we discussed today has been about human trafficking, and would love to kind of hear maybe just a short message from you about refugees, because their plight also requires our heart as much as human trafficking. So let's hear from Ursula first, and then Raksha, and then Winnie, specifically about how you feel about that, and what can be done, just in a maybe short time. Thank you.
Sorry, can you just clarify that again? Sorry, you're just speaking about the context of refugees?
Yes, yeah.
So maybe I can just support you there. Is one of the things and the areas that we've seen is the issue of refugees around the globe, and particularly in South Africa, and the social evil around things like xenophobia. You know, it has a double impact. It's not just people being trafficked to work as slaves, but if you're a foreigner and you're in that situation, it's even worse because of perceptions that are being held. Maybe just share something on your thoughts and your experience of some of the foreigners that have been, you know, in this space in South Africa, and why our attitudes towards xenophobia need to change.
Okay. No, I understand now. We've actually had a number of cases that we've worked on involving foreign nationals here in South Africa. And what we've noticed is that there's just always this immediate stigma first of if it's a situation involving a foreigner, they're always seen first as a foreigner instead of a human being that's being exploited. So it's one of the things that we've picked up, like whether it's the way the law enforcement interacts with them or other stakeholders interact with them, it's always a case of wanting to see them as, for instance, an illegal foreigner first before anything else. But we bring them forth and we're trying to advocate that this is a victim of trafficking. This is what happened to them as a human being. We're not looking that they are a foreigner or that they don't have their documentation. Why don't you want to understand their story first of how they got here and what happened to them? Because not everyone really, like, the assumption is that, oh, they jumped the border or they came here illegally because they were trying to take advantage. But they're not understanding the person's story of there was vulnerability in the beginning, and that's how they ended up being in the situation that they're at. Or where some of them had the documentation, but it was actually taken away. What does that mean for them? That they came here properly, but they were taken advantage of solely because they were refugees. So what is then being done in that context? So what you're saying is true that it's unfortunate, but it's instances where xenophobia is present, where people are not being assisted according to what their actual crimes have been done against them, but they're seen first as that they are just illegal and that they're foreigners and that's it. And it's not right because we're all human beings. And like we said, this is a crime that takes away your human right. It takes away your freedom, which you all have the right to have. So it should be seen first from that point of view before anything else.
Thank you.
so much.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Raksha, can you share also a short remark, and then Winnie? Thank you.
Okay. So for me, when we talk about human rights, we don't talk about human rights linked to a South African human rights. Human is a human, and we have a duty of care to protect human beings. People have come here because of their hardships in their countries, and humanness and humanity means we must help and be empathetic towards those people. The last thing that I have to say is that it's as we speak, in the last few weeks, there have been people that have not allowed foreigners access to basic healthcare in our public hospitals. They have been insisting on seeing their documentation and using force to not let them enter the hospitals. And we've been protesting and saying no to that. So I understand these humans come from the perspective that they feel they've been not given enough in terms of service delivery in the country. But it doesn't help for us to make other people suffer so that it makes our point clear that we have not getting enough. So the appeal is for us to understand humanness and be empathetic and understand that the world is one family and to help each other. Because as I gave the hand example, when we help each other, we help ourselves.
Thank you so much, Raksha. And Winnie, your concluding remarks?
Thank you. So just looking into the refugees, we actually do have a program where we do work directly with just refugees who are either in urban, majorly those who are staying in urban centers. And we do have a governance structure overall that really gets to discriminate, looking into what they're able to have access to. And that has really led them to be more vulnerable to more abuse by the locals in the communities where they're staying in, but also by foreigners, smugglers, and traffickers. So really that is a gap where they become more vulnerable as well to trafficking because of where they're positioned. They don't have documents which actually acquire employment, or even being able to set up their own businesses. It becomes challenging for them to have those documents. Where they stay, sometimes you find there's a rise when it comes to how much you have to pay for rent. And really there are many dynamics they have to deal with, because now the locals look at them as people who bring in more dynamics around culture, around what they're able to access. And so they're not seen on a positive light. And it's looking into how best can they be supported where they are actually being settled. But then, unfortunately, those who are forced to stay in the camps are well known to be breeding grounds for smugglers and traffickers. So it's really, you find their position in a point where when you're in or out of the camps, really, there are many ways you are bound to be exploited and being abused. So we have to be able to look into how best can we be able to support those who are displaced, those who are refugees, and really the most marginalized and the vulnerable in our community.
They're the most vulnerable in our community. And I think that's a very important point to actually end the program today. And it's thoughts that will actually make the religious communities consider in the upcoming IF20 summit that's going to be held in Cape Town. I think these are critical issues that will be raised. And thank you all, each and every one of you, for the voices and the messages that you've shared today. It's alarming, and it's also a time for a conscience check with all our religious people. Sandile?
Yeah, thank you. You're so right, Yashika. They've done so well to paint this picture for us. Very grim reality. 50 million people. I'm also grateful that they taught us that we all have a role to play, each of us. And it starts with educating ourselves. It's the only way we can prevent, by knowing the signs, knowing how we can help people, know which number to call. I think things like this, we always think they're just for the police, but even as a man of the cloth, the woman of the cloth, you need to know about it. You need to get the numbers. You need to know how to act, where to go, what to do. But also, I think we need to be willing to go into our purses, our wallets, to be able to help. Because much of what we're hearing today is that these are brothers and sisters, and if they're brothers and sisters to us, we need to help them, and we need to rescue. We need to help people as they rebuild their lives. It's each of our responsibility. But I think for me, more than anything, what needs to be done from what we learn here, we take those conversations into our homes, into our mosque, into our churches, into our synagogues, wherever we are, to discuss with our peers and find solutions, because no one is going to come and rescue us. It's only us. So thank you so much, everybody. It's been good to have you. I hope you have a wonderful evening or great day. Thank you so much.
Take care.